Yes, good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. Good morning, Tuesday, the 13th of April. Time is flying by, but we are all right in these days and time, I think. Man, the minute we get comfortable, some other stuff happens out here. Been watching the trial, Derek Chauvin? I have. Or as much as I could. I was watching gavel to gavel, but then I got so sick and tired of them showing the murder, couldn't take it anymore. So I only could take it in pieces, But I'm hearing a lot of stuff, and man, I don't know what to say. I guess you have to go through that kind of tedious questioning in a trial, a murder trial. But I guess the question now is, how did we spend so much time on the character and who George Floyd was, as opposed to the state of mind and character of the officer? He's the one on trial, not George. George is the victim. I don't know. Maybe I don't know enough about it. So shoot, I'll reach out to my legal beagles, the legal eagles, the top-notch courtroom warriors. Ludlow B. Creary, good morning, my brother.
Morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Just trying to make sense of it all. It's a lot going on here in these streets. And we're watching the trial and we're being traumatized all over again. But then again, the kid gets pulled over for expired tags, and the officer mistakes her taser for her weapon, and her weapon for her taser, or whatever. She made a mistake.
Yes.
There's a lot going on there, Brother Creary.
There is. There's a lot going on. I haven't even really, gotten all the details on that incident that happened this weekend. I mean, but it's mind-boggling how something like that can happen in the backdrop of this trial. It's just amazing.
Man. All right. Well, shoot, we're watching the trial here, and it has turned into an inquisition of the character of George Floyd, in my opinion. Why would the defense turn? I mean, I know they're looking for reasonable doubt and all that there, but come on, they're just making it a trial about George Floyd.
Well, I mean, that's pretty standard for defense teams, particularly in cases like this, where they have what you call what is known as bad facts for the defense. So they have to, in order to try to be effective for their client, they have to deflect. And it's a strategy that is very widely used in criminal justice by defense lawyers.
I see. Well,
I've used it.
I was going to ask you. So, have you done that?
Yes, absolutely. I've done it.
All right.
And it doesn't. That doesn't mean it's going to be effective. But one of my colleagues, who's a public defender, Black woman, said this to me the other day. She said, you have to remember, the defense can't just sit there and do nothing. They have to do something to help their client. And legally, under the Constitution, the defense could sit there and actually do nothing, because the burden is on the prosecution to prove their case. But in reality, if a defense lawyer is not doing something for their client, even in a case like this where the facts are just bad for the defense, the evidence is bad for Mr. Chauvin. If they don't do anything, they could be accused of what's called ineffective assistance of counsel, and the case could theoretically get overturned based on the defense attorney doing nothing for their client, or not doing anything to help their client. So it all plays into a larger whole. It's like everybody's playing their role so that hopefully justice will prevail out of that. So if the defense lawyer is making sure that he puts the prosecutor through their paces, and then after a conviction, assuming that Mr. Chauvin gets convicted, then there are less things that Mr. Chauvin can appeal the case on. But if the defense lawyer isn't fighting for their client, then that's going to be an issue that he can raise on appeal. My defense lawyer basically sold me out. My defense lawyer abandoned me. So it all plays into a larger whole. It's everything plays a role, is what I'm saying. I know it's counterintuitive. I know it doesn't seem like common sense, but it all is happening, and all of it really, if he gets convicted, it's a good thing that his defense lawyer did all the things he did.
We're waiting and being patient with the system and wanting to, have the system and justice will prevail. We hope, but we've seen this so many times where we saw what we saw on video, and yet the officers got off. Time and time again.
True.
It's just very, very scary, very nerve-wracking to see. And just even consider the notion that, doggone it, this guy, he just might get off. Something might happen, fall out of the sky, and his butt will get off, smooth off. That's really something.
Yeah. And it happens. Most lawyers are not going to make, hard predictions on outcomes, because we know, anything can happen. But I'm gonna get as close to making one as I can here, and just based on what's going on. You have had 2 weeks of police witnesses and medical experts basically saying two things. The police witnesses are saying this was beyond excessive force. This was way out of policy. There was no reason for him to have his knee on his neck because he wasn't resisting at that point. There was no reason for him to have his knee on his neck for 9 minutes. And his own supervisor, Chauvin's own supervisor, and Chauvin's own police chief basically said this is just not something that was within the training manuals. It's not within his training. And it was, it's something that would have been would not have been condoned by department brass and by the training policies of our department. So they basically, took away any justification for Chauvin's actions. So that's the first thing that was established. Then you have the medical experts making it very clear that Chauvin killed him. Chauvin caused him to either suffocate, or the force was just too much for Mr. Floyd's body to take. But the cause of Mr. Floyd's death was Mr. Chauvin's actions. That was made very clear within the first 2 weeks of this trial. And the defense tried to, spin it and another way, it's his heart condition plus the drug use and all that. But at the end of the day, none of the medical experts were gonna give him any credence on that. They weren't going to co-sign any part of that. And they did a great job. So, and then the last reason why I think, this is different. They've got from what I can see, they've got a good jury. They don't have a jury that literally, based on the evidence we've seen, this jury would have to do what's called jury nullification, which is basically, doesn't matter what the law and the facts say, we don't want to convict this guy, so we're just going to basically nullify it and find him not guilty. I don't think you have that kind of a jury. I mean, if this was South Carolina in 1963 and the defendant was a black man accused of raping a white woman, yeah, I would think there's no way he's going to get convicted. That's not the kind of jury we have here.
Yeah, because they sure did try to discredit George Floyd, call him, his drug use, his. I mean, they would try to say the guy's knee was on his shoulder and not his neck. I was like, oh my goodness, yeah.
And it just and the risk of using the defense of basically, alternative facts is that people are going to see that that's ridiculous, and it's actually going to work to even further alienate the jury from the defense, because now it's clear to us you're trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and you're trying to pee on us and tell us it's raining. Juries aren't stupid.
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting, Ludlow, the big black brute, defense keeps coming up, and it just reminds me how, white people are in fear, like of black males just in general. And the fact that this even comes up in a court of law, as perhaps that's the reason that this force was used, because he was a really big guy, is, it's incredible. It just illustrates that folks are living in fear when they see a black man.
Absolutely. It's just, this is America. This is what America has always been, and I mean, this is a whole nother discussion, really, Greg, but think about it. We go back to slavery. Who was the biggest threat in an uprising against the plantation owners and the slave traders? It was the black male. So what did they do? They did everything they could to restrain the black male and emasculate him, so that he would pose, so they could minimize the threat of him literally slitting their throats. And so then this just became a way of life in America. And the myths of the black man being this boogeyman have gone into, I mean, they're just part of the fabric of this nation. And you move on up through to that movie by D.W. Griffith, The Birth of a Nation. What was that movie about? It was about the birth of the Klan, and the Klan was going to save white women from these black rapists. Then you move up to today. What do and we talk about LA County, and we talk about DA George Gascon, and what are these people really afraid of? They're afraid that people that look like you and me are going to come up out of the hood and go into Beverly Hills and places like that and rob and pillage. So they need to be protected from us, and the DA is not doing his job in protecting them from us. And that's really what is at the core of this anti-George Gascon movement, is that somehow these savages from the inner city are going to now come into their neighborhoods and be a threat to them. And they're not going to say it. They're not going to put it in those stark terms, but that's exactly what's going on. Exactly. When have people in wealthy parts of LA County cared ever about what's going on at 109th and whatever in South LA? Never. That's a whole nother discussion.
That's really, but still interesting. In the psychology of racism certainly is on display here. Now, what do you think is going to happen in these next coming days? 10 miles away from the trial in Minnesota, the young man was shot and killed, pulled over because he had expired tags, found out he had a misdemeanor warrant.
Mhm.
The woman police officer pulls out what she thought was her taser, and it was her weapon, and she shot and killed him. I'm having a hard time this morning wrapping my brain around it because the officer was 26-year veteran, a training officer. Even at the moment of this deed, she was training a rookie. You know, I just don't see how the military man in me just says, okay, how I can't see how you mistake your taser for your weapon. I can't see it. What
Yeah,
happened?
it's one word, fear. And just it's just what you and I have been talking about for the last
Mm,
5 minutes.
mm,
This this outsized fear of the black male.
mhm,
She, 26-year veteran, can't remember where her taser is and ends up pulling out her pistol and shoots this kid.
right.
I mean, and then, in the middle of a trial uh, that has one of her colleagues, being prosecuted for murder
Mm,
of a black man, and she does this. I mean, obviously she wasn't thinking.
mm,
Obviously she defaulted to that fear that has been instilled in her since she was probably a child. Which, I mean, I'm gonna be presumptuous here and assume that's partly why she probably became a cop. You know, and here she is confronted with this big black boogeyman in a car
mhm.
who, you know, poses a threat to her. So she just pulls the first thing she can find off of her belt and shoots him. I don't know if and then there's the other part of it. Did she really not know what she was pulling out, or is that just her excuse now to save her behind?
Yeah, the body cam shows her saying taser, taser, but
Oh,
still, I
okay,
mean, it's
okay.
different
I haven't
weights
seen it.
and the whole. I mean, come on, come on. I
Yeah.
saw a post from a friend of mine who's a LAPD officer, and he
Uh huh.
said, he said, if you that scary on the job, then you need to get out. you know,
Yeah.
it's a tough situation. That's a
Yeah.
and the police chief already came out and said it was accidental and all that. So he's already creating the path to acquitting this woman no matter what happens. I feel like he's already creating the blue line of protection around her by saying that. But I just think he needs to he should have waited and found out what really happened before he said, "Oh, it was accidental."
I would agree. I mean,
Mm,
that's not. Look, the, and this gets to something else, and
mm,
I don't really want to talk about this, but let's be real. With what we've seen in this trial, and then this kid getting shot and killed by this police officer, if 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 Chauvin is not convicted, it's going to be a bad scene. It's going to be bad.
yeah,
It's
I
going
agree.
to be bad.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're just too reminded in these days and time. I mean, just where we live in America and just what is happening around us, the prevailing attitudes around us, spoken and unspoken.
Hmm.
It's a dangerous proposition. But
Hmm.
man, I keep repeating to myself an encounter with the police could be deadly
Hmm.
by accident.
By
Jeez.
accident, and too often on purpose. You
Mhm.
know. Yeah,
Man, so
I would agree.
I don't know what the answer is in this situation. What is the answer and how we can begin to work towards solutions? I mean, the flowery words and actions out there right now don't mean a lot because we're just starting to see it is what it is, right? It's just being reminded time and time again. It is what it is. History has already shown us, and no longer can our white colleagues say, "Well, that was just the past," because it's still happening now. and it will continue to happen, I believe. I mean, accident or no, knee on the neck, shoot in the back. I mean, just time, and time again. It
But
keeps
but
happening.
but Greg, and again, I get back to what's happening in LA County.
Mhm.
You have this progressive prosecutor who's really trying to make a difference, and you have the Supreme Court that just ruled, that nobody can be kept in jail awaiting trial just because they cannot afford bail. So either a reasonable bail that they can afford has to be set, or they have to be released, assuming that it's not um, a crime that's of extreme violence.
Mhm.
So we've got this progressive movement in criminal justice going on across the United States.
Mhm.
LA is kind of, right now we're the center of attention on it because we're the biggest, we're the most major city that is adopting this right now on the scale that it's being adopted. And we're the state of California, is being watched. As they say, so they sometimes say, as California goes, so goes the nation.
Mhm.
Well, California is being watched because there's a strong progressive movement going on here in criminal justice, and this is this is where things are going. These incidences and these trials that are being publicly broadcast are changing things in terms of what the public expects, to happen. And you, the pendulum is swinging away from this hardcore law and order, um, position to a more equitable position. You can see it happening, and it's not happening overnight, and it's not happening suddenly. But the thing about it is after the events of this last summer, it was very clear that we can't go backwards on criminal justice,
Mhm.
because if we continue if our society and our cities and our nation continues to ignore um, these issues, there's just going to be more and more unrest. There's going to be more and more chaos because people are going to feel they have nothing to lose, and that's what you saw happening. So the forces that are pushing back against reform are just in denial.
Mhm.
It's just like, on a broader scale, the Trump movement, the QAnon movement, you know, all of that is really just a backlash to the fact that society is progressing, uh, and they're trying to hold on to whatever they thought, they owned. And that's why you've got, it's not that there's more racism. The racism is just becoming more visible because it's under more of a threat.
Mhm. Mhm. So let me ask you, okay, so LA County, George Gascon, hotly contested race. He gets into
Hmm.
office, he begins to make all kinds of changes
Hmm.
almost immediately. And what
Hmm.
you're saying is that these are good reforms. Can you name something
Absolutely.
specific? Yeah, give me something specific that you see. I mean, I just to remind everybody, Brother Ludlow Creary the second is a criminal defense attorney, and he par excellence, and so he's traveling all over the state, defending the people, and just he's in there. He's a gladiator in these here courtrooms, and so he knows what he's talking about. Very very informed voice in this area of criminal justice reform. So, Ludlow, what are some of the things that really are standing out that you and your colleagues are talking about and got your eye on?
Well, like you said, Greg, he jumped out the gate,
Mhm.
with these reforms. Now there's a lawsuit that the DA's union has filed in civil court, and so there's an injunction. There's now an injunction against his reforms, and I just want to just think about that for a minute. The
So wait a
people
minute,
that
the
are
VA has a
supposed to
union?
change, they have a union, and the people that are supposed to change
Hmm.
are the ones that filed the lawsuit, his own employees.
Hmm.
Okay, so what does that tell you? You know, They don't want to change, obviously.
Right.
They want to do things the way they did things in the past.
Yeah.
So one of the major reforms, directives, was that they're no longer going to try juveniles as adults.
Mm.
You know, and that it used to be that way.
Mhm.
It used to be that way. So you're not going to have kids, 16 years old getting life sentences, 17 years old getting life sentences and going to state prison when they turn 18. You're not going to have that anymore. And these are children, and scientists, psychologists and psychiatrists in studies have determined and that the juvenile brain is still being formed, which means a juvenile is still capable of rehabilitation. And they're a juvenile. That's what under the law they're a juvenile. They're not an adult, so they should not be treated like an adult. So these are kids that can be saved instead of convicted as an adult and then locked up for the rest of their life. That's one thing. The other thing is he's no longer seeking the death penalty.
Mhm.
And we all know the death penalty and the way it's been implemented is racist.
Mhm.
We all know that. He has tried to, he just this last week disbanded the gang unit of the DA's office.
Mhm.
Hardcore gang unit of the DA's office. Now, in my opinion, the problem with gang prosecution is that they're very quick to label everybody an active gang member.
Mhm.
And when you're doing a trial and the jury hears gang member or finds out that the defendant is affiliated with a gang, it's over. They don't even want to hear, in my experience,
Mhm.
they don't even want to hear any evidence about what happened. Oh, he's a gang member, he's guilty.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's been my experience. And some people would disagree with me on that, but that's been my experience as a defense lawyer in a lot of my gang cases. Not all of them. Sometimes I win them in spite of the gang evidence, but it's been used unfairly. And everybody's not a active gang member, and everybody's not acting on behalf of a gang when they allegedly commit a crime. So that law is just unfair. And it'll add a life sentence to a crime that was not a life crime. Just being a member of a gang will turn it into a life sentence. So Gascon he's not going to do that anymore. He's not going to pursue gang allegations. And, he disbanded the gang unit. So now if you are charged with a crime, you're just charged with a crime that you committed or that you alleged to have committed. You're not going to be charged and then it's going to be added. Oh, and by the way, he's a member of the gang too. So that adds 25 years to life. We're going to add 25 years to life to his potential sentence because he's a member of a gang or because we believe he's a member of a gang.
Let me ask you, so what type
Those are just two things.
Right. Okay. So now what about, instances of police abuse in LA County? I mean, certainly we have had our share of situations like what's happening out there in Minnesota. What are some of the positive moves that, Gascon might be making to eliminate or at least reduce wrongful death, improper use of force?
Well, what George Gascon's doing, I mean, he's the DA. He's not, he has no power
over the police.
Really over the police department and their policies. He can prosecute, but he can't control their policies, and he can't control their discipline. He can't control their training. He can't even really sue them for police abuse. That's really that's really the job of, say, a civil rights lawyer, or even the state or the federal government can do it. But the DA is really mainly just a criminal prosecution agency. So, but what he's going to, so what can he do?
Mm-hmm.
Prosecute bad cops. That's how he can implement police policy, or how he can affect police policy. Prosecute bad cops. Do what Jackie Lacey was often not willing to do. Prosecute bad cops who commit crimes against the citizens.
Wow. So now is all right. Well, let me ask you another way: is the LAPD doing a good job in this area?
Of what?
Reducing violent. Um,
I think let's just put this, relatively speaking, yes. I mean, relatively speaking, yes. The LAPD, LA has went through a lot of what the rest of other parts of our nation, other cities in our country are going through now.
Mm-hmm.
LA went through that in 1992, 1965, and then 1992. So there has been some effort toward reform in LA and LA County. And so relatively speaking, it's better here. But can it be better? Absolutely, it can be better. And this culture of police, can do no wrong. They're heroes. They're here, if it's between an officer and a average citizen, the officer is more credible because he's a police officer and he or she wears that badge. That's problematic because police officers are human beings just like the rest of us, and they can and do lie. They can and will be honest, and they can and will lie just like the average human being will. Their being in a uniform and having a badge and having this training does not make them pure. It might mean that we hold them to a higher standard, but it doesn't mean they're going to automatically live up to that standard. And often they do not live up to that standard, and then they get away with it. Then they get away with not living up to that standard because they have the badge. That is problematic, and that still goes on in LA County.
We originate here in Long Beach, California. I know you're a proud resident of Long Beach. How's our police department doing in this area?
I don't. Long Beach PD is, to me, is like, they literally are a clone of LAPD, in my opinion. They're just like LAPD.
That's a good one.
Yeah, they're training the way they're just like LAPD. So I think the same level of reform that has that we've seen in LAPD, we've seen in Long Beach. I think in some ways Long Beach came a lot further, because when I was a teenager, I saw Long Beach and Signal Hill, based on what I heard, because I was from LA, as like the Jim Crow South, for a black kid. I wasn't even going to try to venture down there back then, because I just heard these stories. I mean, Ron Settles and all these other things. Yeah. So from what I believed back when I was a kid to now, they've come a long way. But same problems, the same problems that we have in LA with law enforcement, being given the benefit of the doubt. And when I talk about that, I talk about my experience in the courtroom and how I have to overcome law enforcement having the benefit of the doubt when I'm trying a case.
It's interesting you say that about Long Beach, because I think you might have been here a lot longer than me, but since I have been here, my friends in LA, I'll get those calls from the brothers saying, "Hey man, be careful down there," because there's still that stigma that Long Beach has, and especially Signal Hill, yes, because of Ron Settles back in those days.
Yeah, Greg, Yeah. Go ahead. I didn't
Yeah,
mean to cut you off.
yeah, and you're right. The police do get the benefit of the doubt, don't they? And we're conditioned as the public to
Mhm.
give them this blind trust. We
Yeah.
feel better. Who are you going to call in the case of a situation around your neighborhood? You're going to call the police. We want to trust them. We want to be protected because after all, they're supposed to be protect and serve.
Exactly. And we want, we need to believe in the police because the police are there to protect us, right? The problem, as I see it, and this goes back historically, the police in the South, where many of us came from, our ancestors came from the southern states of the United States, they were developed as a slave patrol.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's how policing began in the South. We all know that Daryl Gates and Parker before him recruited, it was Chief Parker actually, and I'm sure it was the police chiefs before Chief Parker, recruited from the South. So a lot of those officers that were beating those people in 1965 in Watts were Southern boys, who this is how they dealt with black people that didn't fall in line. So policing to our community isn't about protecting and serving. It's about containing and suppressing.
Yeah, you can definitely see
Slave
that,
patrol.
and they're a paramilitary force too. You can see them. You can tell that that's definitely the thing. I'd be
Yeah.
interested to hear what their um, perspectives are now in such a time as this. I mean, um, we've had the protests last year in Long Beach.
Mm.
I know there's been dialogue about certain cases around the city of Long Beach with the police, and I mean, I would be highly disappointed if they didn't like look inward and begin to like, okay, how can I change or adapt or remodel the way that we do what we do in such a time as this. I'd be interested to hear what they're thinking about Derek Chauvin right now in
Well,
Long
all the
Beach.
all my my police officer friends. I have a few police officer friends, and a lot of them will say, what he did was wrong. It was there's really no justification for it. But then they will also remind me of that not all police are like that, and
You hear
and,
that?
and then and then there's and then a lot of times when you talk about reform, it's a nowhere conversation
Mhm.
because people don't. This is a human trait. People don't like to change. People do not like to change. Organizations do not want to change. When a culture is entrenched in an organization, it is going to take. It's going to be like moving a mountain
Mhm.
to change the culture of that organization. It
Mhm.
took a civil war to end slavery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true thought right there. I mean, I always ask this question, because we heard the cry last year. I mean, you were here on Coffee Conversations, right? When
Hmm.
it all happened, we were trying to figure out was Chauvin even going to be arrested? Remember
Right.
that one, and the battle cry in these streets has been defund the police,
Hmm.
but yet there's a spike in crime and all this kind of stuff is going on. What do you think about defund the police? What comes to your mind?
Well, defund the police. I think people misunderstand it because my understanding of defund the police is not that you're literally like going to just take all their budget and their money away from them and then they can't function. Defund the police is really about taking some of the monies that have been directed toward the police, which is a substantial part of many cities' budgets,
Mm-hmm.
and direct some of that money toward other, health, mental health departments, things like that, where obviously police officers are not trained, equipped, or mentally prepared to deal with a mentally ill person. And that's why so many people get shot or killed who really the situation could have been de-escalated with the right the right approach from a mental health professional, and this person would still be alive today, and maybe they could have gotten help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, when police are confronted with a threat, they're going to react a certain way, and that's what they're trained to do when they perceive a threat. So defund the police is really about, okay, let's take some of that money that, you know, is going toward a lot of the paramilitary police gear that is probably not necessary, and let's take some of it and put it toward other agencies that can help the police to deal with a lot of these situations in ways that won't have a bad outcome. Of course, the police don't want that because they don't want any of their budget being taken away from them. So they're going to spin it in another way. They're going to say, oh, they're trying to take law enforcement. It's going to be chaos. There won't be any cops. You know, defund the police. The police won't have any money. We won't have gas to put in our cars. You know, I mean, and then crime's going to just go out of control. That's not what the responsible reformers are talking about. Maybe some other people on the outside are talking about, yeah, we don't need a police. We don't need the police. Nobody who's responsible is saying we don't need the police. No one is saying that.
Come on, you need the police out here, yo. Let's keep it real.
yeah, we need them, and no one's saying we don't. But we need them we need good cops, and we need good cops that are well trained, and we need cops to know their limitations. And you know, if this isn't working, then let's figure out something else that will work. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing here is the preservation of human life. That's why you actually exist, Mr. Officer, to keep the peace. You're there to keep the peace. You're a peace officer. You're not a soldier fighting enemy combatants. Or at least that's not what you're supposed to be.
But you know what? There's people, depending on how they're raised, and then they get assigned to, you know, different areas. That's how they see us when they look at Black people.
Yeah.
You know, this is how they see us. They see us as a combatant. And I think that's the thinking that we have to get. So it gets down to, for me, Ludlow, it's like we could change all the rules and policies and all that. It'll be all good on paper. But how do you change the hearts of men and women?
You know, that's a tough one, Greg. That's the $64,000 question. And, you know, historically, how do you change the hearts of men? You know, believe it or not, these days are not the worst of times for humanity. You know, we've always had conflict. We've always had greed. We've always had governments that oppress people. We've always had war. We've always had, you know, human misfortune ever since human beings have been around. So I don't know that you can eradicate it. I don't know if we're ever going to have a utopia, but what we can do is, you know, understand that change takes a lot of work, and you have to be patient, and you have to never let up. And one way we can make these changes is, I don't know that we're going to be able to change the hearts of everybody, but what we can do is we can make sure that we are very purposeful in hiring police officers and making sure that we get well-rounded individuals that don't harbor these sorts of white supremacist, you know, ideology, this white supremacist ideology that is prevalent in many police departments. And it's not just white officers that harbor it.
That's right.
I'll give you a short story about when I was a teenager, when I was a kid. I was about 14 years old. And, you know, I think you know part of my story. My parents moved to Beverly Hills when I was 6. So I lived there for a good portion of my formative years. So anyway, I'm walking out of my front door one day. I'm 14 years old. And just being a kid, coming out of my front door. This cop is driving up the street, sees me come out of the front door, makes a U-turn, stops, gets out of the car, and then asks me if I have any ID. And I'm like, no, I don't have any ID on me, sir. Well, what are you doing coming out of that front door? I said, I live there. Oh, well, we'll see about that. Mm-hmm. So he walks me up to my front door, knocks on the door. My grandmother answers the door, and he says, does he live here? My grandmother says, yes, that's my grandson. So this officer looks at me and looks at my grandmother and says, oh, well, next time I guess I'll just say hello. Wow. Now, the real kicker of this story was that this officer was a black man. Yep. So I had to justify my existence in the city of Beverly Hills. I couldn't even walk out of my front door without having to present ID as to why I was even there. Mm. So it's this white supremacy thing. It's not just white cops or white people that black people have internalized that. People from other groups have internalized white supremacy. So we have to hire police officers that have been trained and have had experience that has given them another perspective other than, the only people that deserve protection are people that look like Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, right?
And people who look like DMX or Jay-Z are the threat.
It's interesting because, when we look at what has happened in Minnesota, when we look at just the history of everything, you're right, that black officer, in order to be successful, started to put on the jacket of the code of white supremacy, and he wants to question your right for even being. Now you're seeing it's not only the police that are questioning our rights for even being, it's people call them, we might go to a park and somebody call the police on us because we look like we didn't belong there. It's really, really crazy. And see, this is ingrained in people, and when you look all around the world, this they demand for us to prove where we're, that we're supposed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Justify your existence.
Justify your existence. Yeah. And they have a science now to it. I've been to a few, diversity, equity, and inclusion seminars, and all of this whole thing. And people are okay. They give them a point for at least trying to figure this whole thing out. But this whole thing is unconscious bias. So a lot of times they don't. It's just a natural way of their interactions in order to demand why we are where we are, or
exactly,
these unconscious bias. So I asked, when the woman cop shot the brother out there in Minnesota, was that unconscious bias?
I believe it was.
So these
her fear was not her fear. She's a trained police officer. Mm-hmm. Her fear, 26-year veteran, you said, her fear is at such a level that she doesn't remember which weapon is which and where and which hand, when they're on opposite sides of her waist,
right,
which hand is supposed to go to which weapon.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Unconscious bias played a role in that.
So you don't.
Or conscious bias. Or conscious
just
bias.
A freaking reaction.
Yeah.
Pull out my gun and shoot.
Yeah.
We live in dangerous times there, counselor.
We do, Greg, but as Black people in America, we always have.
Yeah.
We always have lived in dangerous times. And only now, I think, we're at the end game here. We're at the end point. Mm-hmm. Change has to happen. It has to happen.
Mm. My dad used to say that back in the civil rights days.
There you
He
go.
used to say, "Man, if it don't happen this time, it's gonna be all out revolution."
But this generation coming up behind me, the millennials and the Gen Zers, they're
Mhm.
or Gen Y, is it Gen Y? I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway, they're a different breed.
yeah,
They're a
man.
different breed.
Yeah, man. That's our children.
They do not believe in this. They do not believe in this system one bit.
Right.
We did. The baby boomers and the Generation Xers, we still believed and still believe present tense in this system. These kids don't.
In the
So
notion
there's
of
a difference
America.
here. There's a difference.
In the
Hmm.
notion of America, the concept of democracy, that all are created equal. We still
Hmm.
believe in that.
We still believe in it. They're
But
looking at us
it's
like you guys are fools.
yeah, because it's been going on for so long,
Yeah.
and but then what is the all right, so then what is the end game? Let's say, okay, if Derek Chauvin gets off, what does that say to us? Other than what
Well,
we already know.
it says that there's going to be no willing change, and then I'm just going to pray.
Hmm.
I'm going to pray because these young people, they've already shown last summer.
Yeah, they don't give a flying
they,
fruit
they
because
don't
it's
give
all
a you
popping.
know what, and I don't condone it,
Right.
but I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that. Me too. I went out there, man, in Long Beach on May 31st.
Hmm.
I took my little camera. I went out there. I just wanted to feel it, and see
Yeah.
what was happening. And I have to admit that, I was taken by surprise and actually very proud to see. Okay, these are my sons and daughters and nieces and nephews out here. Hey, this is what's up. They're
Yep.
really raising their voice, and it's easy for those of you who disagree with the protest of last summer. I know you're going to start talking about them looting. you know, Let me tell you something. I saw 92 LA. Y'all didn't see really. I mean, you saw some looting, and that's tragic. But hey, it was going down in Los Angeles during the civil unrest. But
Yes.
that's not an excuse. I think when we begin to talk about the unfortunate looting, because there are people, bad actors, right, and
Yeah.
they're out there and they're going to take advantage of the situation. But
Mm.
to focus on that is to ignore the message that children from, well, not so much children, but children from all races took to these streets to say, hey,
Mhm.
this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is incorrect. This is
Yeah.
not what America should be about.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I hope that Derek Chauvin gets convicted. I hope that the woman who shot Brother Dante over the weekend, I'm saying fire, arrest, sue, convict. That's what
Mhm.
I'm saying right there. I really believe that needs to happen. If it
Mhm.
doesn't happen, then it just underscores something that we probably subconsciously already know, and that
Mhm.
they don't give a care.
No. Well, and they should care because it, it's gonna it affects everybody,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
including people that are not in the oppressed community. This affects everybody. This affects the progress of this nation. There's no there. What the message of everything that's going on is that the system as it has been is no longer functional.
Mm-hmm.
It's hurting everybody, and it doesn't make sense anymore. And you've just got people that just don't want to change,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is understandable because that's how people are. Change is difficult. Change
Change
is,
is difficult.
people don't want to change, but change has to happen because this is no longer functional. And,
And
and yeah.
it's going to take a personal, redemptive work in a person's soul, because even again, I mean, we have all these rules, but you could be in business situations or walk in the store, and you could feel it, man. You can feel when they there's hatred
Yeah.
on these here streets.
Yeah, there is. There is. And
Shoot.
and and look, I am not in any way affected by their hatred. To me, that just underscores that we're on the right path. If you're exhibiting that kind of animosity toward me just because of the color of my skin and you don't know anything about me, that tells me that you're in a very uncomfortable situation and you're miserable about it and you're lashing out. And that tells me that change is actually happening. Otherwise, you'd have no reason to be, giving me, the evil eye the way you are.
Right, right, right.
You
They
know?
give it to you.
Oh yeah.
Man, you look at when you get to the grocery store. Sometimes you get those looks of like, what?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not gonna justify my existence this time.
right? Yeah, yeah. That's
I have no interest in your approval.
Mm-hmm.
I think and black people have gotten to a point where we are no longer, as a group, are no longer interested in the approval of others because we realize after all this said and done, we'll never get it.
Yeah.
The only way we're going to get it is if we are in a position of power. Otherwise, we'll never get their approval, and we shouldn't really be focusing on their approval anymore. Yeah. We just need to build our own. We need to build up and use our political power to get things done that are in our interests, just like everybody else does.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a powerful statement right there, Ludlow, because you're right. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure we get their approval and all this here. And no, not anymore. We have to approve of ourselves first.
Exactly.
It's now about, back in the day, Jesse Jackson used to say, it's nation time,
Mm-hmm.
So it's nation time more than ever right now.
Absolutely.
And, we have to change paradigms and attitudes about ourselves that we exhibit against one another, because clearly the nation, generally speaking, we're just, they don't care.
We'll never be good enough.
We'll never be good enough
because we live in a caste system, and we the way this system is set up is we are supposed to be at the bottom. Mm-hmm. That is how they started off exploiting our labor so they could build what they needed to build an economy. And that was our role. That's why they brought us here. So this caste structure has never really changed. Mm-hmm. So if people come here from other countries and they get the memo, okay, black people ain't SHI, what?
Yeah.
And then they treat us accordingly, even though they know nothing about our history, mm-hmm. because that's how this system was set up from the beginning. And so we have to recognize that we will never be able to do enough as a people to be approved of, because anytime we try to reach parity, they're going to try to find a way to try to swat it down. So we have to just say, okay, we are no longer looking for your acceptance and your approval. We are going to work toward gaining our own position of power and strength so that it doesn't matter whether you like us or not. You can't stop us. And we've already shown that with our vote in this last election. Mm-hmm. We have shown what our power can do. Our power can elect presidents. So what is the Republican response to that? To try to enact laws in 48 states that are by any other name Jim Crow laws.
Jim Crow laws. That's right. Yes.
So that's what's happening right now in real time, because they're trying to undermine our power because we have the power to elect presidents.
Yeah. We have the power. My friend moved from LA down to Atlanta, and she was telling me not too long ago that if we began to move back south, where grandma and them are from, we would have control of 9 states, and that would have significant political power in Washington D.C.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
9
incredible.
states. Yeah, that's really, really something, isn't it?
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. So now we have to be, be kinder to one another, build business together, create our own markets. It's past the rhetoric now, y'all. It's all about doing, support each other, love one another. So because where we are is, and we're Americans. Let's call it what it is. I mean,
Yes, we are
we're
Americans.
Americans. So
We
we
built
here,
this country.
but we know where we are from history, and we have to now build a nation within a nation,
Yes.
so that we can better participate in the global nation. I'm going to bring up something that, from a global perspective, because, we're talking about all of these injustices, and you were talking about people who come here from other countries, and also on the lips of every newscaster now is immigration over here in Long Beach that turned the
Hmm.
convention center into a place for the migrant children and everything. And when we talk about immigration, we only think about those coming up from Mexico and Central America.
Hmm.
That's what they seem to be the most afraid of. But you know, quite honestly, the immigration system is also preventing a lot of our brothers and sisters from Africa and the Caribbean nations to come in. I know
Hmm.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, one of her number one advocacies is easing the visa process. So an
Hmm.
African applying for a visa to come into the United States can count on 100% of the time that visa being denied.
Yeah.
They had to go back 2 or 3 times to even get welcomed into the United States. I think one of the largest groups in these detention camps across the country that they have are the people from Dominican Republic. So
Yes.
yeah, you know what, black people are being detained also from all of the black nations. What do you think about that? We got to start helping our brothers and sisters from other nations.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. We need to use our well. African Americans need to understand. We need to understand uh, our that we're part of a diaspora,
Mhm.
and that you know the more that we unify with our brothers and sisters of African descent across the globe, the more power we'll have as a people. I mean, we talk about Afro Latinos, and yes, there's sort of this disconnection between African Americans and Afro Latinos. But Puerto Ricans, for instance, many of them are black people. They're black.
Yep.
Uh, you know, I'm half Jamaican. My father is from Kingston, Jamaica. My mother's from New Orleans, Louisiana. People, Caribbeans are black people. They're not different. They came off the same slave ships.
Yep.
Their ancestors, the ancestors of Puerto Ricans and the ancestors of Jamaicans and Cubans all came off the same slave ships
Mhm.
that we came off, that our ancestors came off of. And in fact, more of the slaves ended up in the Caribbean and in South and Central America than actually ended up in North America. I mean, by millions, like 12 million of them were in, South America and Central America and the Caribbean, whereas about 137,000 actually landed on the shores
Mhm.
of of um, of uh, of North America. So we are connected to all of these people.
Mhm.
We are connected to Africa. Many of our ancestors came from Ghana and Ivory Coast, places like that
Mhm.
in West Africa. We are connected to these people.
Mhm.
So we have to see our connection to these people, and we have to understand our connection to these people, and and really, when they come to the United States, they need to do the same thing. When Puerto Ricans are Americans,
Mhm.
but when people come from other countries, black people come from other countries, they need to understand their connection to us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it's all about power. That's the world runs on power.
And information too. I think
And information.
because we have held at Dream Creator Studio. We've had a couple. Central to what we're doing over here at Dream Creator Studio is building bridges of music, arts, and culture between Africa and America.
Yeah.
And we've held a couple of live stream conversations, dispelling the myths about Africa. And one of those, I was really surprised when my friend from Cameroon, we were discussing this very subject, and they come here and they're looking around, they're trying to figure out why we as Black folks, Black Americans, have not taken advantage of all the opportunities that have happened here in America. But they have no idea what our history has been. And when they begin to learn it, they are surprised.
Flabbergasted.
Yeah. So information is key, I think, in this. Before we go out here, this is a good question here. Rhonda Love, our super producer, poses this, and she's saying, how do we keep our sons encouraged and moving forward as we see what's happening in the news and in our society? We were talking about the young people out there on the front lines and whatnot. How do we keep the young brothers encouraged?
Love them. Show them constant love, and show them how valuable and precious they are to us. I just want to say this. DMX, I was always sort of a mediocre fan of DMX. I liked him, but he wasn't my favorite rapper. But since he passed, I started looking into, who he was as a person. And, it broke my heart, because here's this guy, this beautiful Black man with all this talent, all this to offer the world. Yet the damage that was done to him ultimately ended up in his premature demise. And he's just an example. He's just he is just one example of millions. We have so much. We have so much depth. We have so much intelligence. We have so much creativity. We have so much beauty. We have so much to offer the world, but we are treated like trash. And we internalize it. Many of our young men and women and young women internalize this and become self-destructive as a result. And we got to love our young people. We got to love them. We got to love our young Black men. They are so valuable. They are so valuable, and it's incumbent upon us to teach them and remind them of their value every chance we get. And then they're gonna be all right. When they know their value, they're gonna be all right.
I agree. We have to continuously counter those images that they're seeing, because even look at the lieutenant the other day, pulled out of his car at gunpoint. If a Black man serving one of the most honorable things in the nation is to serve this country in the armed forces, and here he is being pulled out by gunpoint, treated like less than. So yes, love them, because we have to counter those images, because they're saying what we're saying.
Yes.
Wow. Man, Ludlow, Creary, always an honor to be talking to you, chopping it up about the legal situations and circumstances out there. That's for sure. And always good to talk about your music. I know you are. Somebody called me when I put the little graphics out there. I used your tagline: opinionated trial lawyer, litigator. I didn't put the musician on there, but a friend of mine called and said, "What does that mean, opinionated trial lawyer?" I said, "Oh yeah, he's that guy, right?" I said, "Did you know he was a musician too?" It's really interesting. Talk about your music real quick before we get out.
Well, we're working on another song. We've laid down the tracks. The idea is we're going to do another EP that's sort of a concept. It's gonna be kind of like Maxwell's Urban Hang Suite,
Yes.
kind of in that vein.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're working on it now. We just recorded the first song. We are getting that ready. We're not going to release it right away because our intent is to release sort of everything sort of in close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
So up the road, look for that. Otherwise, we're on Spotify, Brown Suede, one word. We're on Apple Music. We're on Tidal. We're on all the platforms. Brown Suede, check us out.
All right, good. Hey, we're going to have to get together again and do another live stream event, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, Brown Suede. Yes, one of my favorites, you know. All right, well, thank you for the conversation about
Thanks, Greg. This was very fulfilling.
Yeah, criminal justice reform and all that. And look, let me just close it by saying, I don't care if George Floyd ate all the drugs in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Brooklyn Park. He still got murdered.
Yep.
So I'm just saying, you know.
Absolutely. I agree 100%, Greg.
All right, y'all. Look, keep your head up. Oh, you know what? Before we go, Thursday's going to be another interesting show. We found a spokesperson for the Bruce family. If you guys know, in Manhattan Beach, the Bruce Beach was a place for Black folks back in the 20s to come, and the county or the city took their land away, and there's been moves by the LA County led by Supervisor Janice Hahn to give that property back to descendants of the Bruce Beach. It's a big story. You guys have been reading about it. I heard Janice Hahn on NPR radio yesterday discussing it. So we're going to have a family spokesperson come on to talk about that. And we're going to talk about, you know, redlining and those things of the past and what it takes to get your land back. This gentleman is also a representative of an Indian tribe, which I'm sure he has some experience in getting land back and reparations and all of that from the government from their past injustice against people of color. So it should be an interesting conversation. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com, all on our Facebook pages, on YouTube, and we're now putting out the audio only version wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support us, just Cash App us or whatever. Independent media, that's what we're doing. Dream Creator Studio, Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com. Love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings.